It all started as a simple neighborhood dispute, but things quickly escalated into something far more serious. Something buried. Something never meant to be discovered. Now, in part 2 of this story, the stakes get even higher. If you thought the first chapter was shocking, just wait until you see what happens next. Let's get into it. The first thing I noticed that morning was the sound, a low, steady rumble like heavy machinery in the distance. At first, I assumed it was just construction nearby. But when I sat up, I realized it wasn't coming from somewhere else. It was coming from my own land. I threw on some clothes and rushed outside. What I saw nearly knocked the air from my lungs. A convoy of military trucks and engineering vehicles had moved onto my property. Soldiers were everywhere, setting up barricades and placing bright yellow warning signs all along the perimeter, right where the bunker entrance had been. Cement mixers churned, backhoes carved deep trenches, and the entire crew moved like they had one goal in mind, to erase every trace of what had been there. Heart racing, I stormed toward the scene. One soldier, tall and sharp-jawed, stepped into my path. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to stay back." I motioned toward the chaos around us. "This is my property. What's going on here?" He didn't blink. "This is a matter of national security. Please return to your home." I clenched my jaw. "National security? You're tearing up my land. I have a right to know what's happening." He didn't budge. "I'm not authorized to provide further details. If you have concerns, you can contact your local administration. Now step back." His tone was flat. Robotic. Behind him, I saw more people in hazmat suits. They were setting up electronic sensors around the site. One of them had a clipboard and was clearly giving orders. I pointed. "Who's that? I want answers." The soldier didn't even look. "That's classified." That was it. I snapped. "So the government can just roll in and take whatever they want, and no one has to explain anything?" The soldier's gaze didn't shift. "Your property has been declared a restricted zone under federal regulation. Civilian access is now prohibited for the next 50 years. 50 years. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I took a step forward, but another soldier blocked my path. "Sir, this is your final warning." I clenched my fists, but I wasn't stupid. I was outnumbered and outpowered. So I turned, shooting one last glare their way, and headed back to my house. I spent the rest of the day watching from my window as they worked. By nightfall, the entire site had been sealed under a thick slab of concrete. Bright red signs surrounded it now. Each one read, "Restricted area, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted." I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that bunker. Those empty halls. That old, flickering equipment. It was all gone now. Buried. Erased. The next morning, I got a knock at the door. It was a courier with a letter, official city stationery, thick paper, gold seal. It was an offer. They wanted to buy my land. Full market value. Plus a generous relocation bonus. No negotiation necessary. All I had to do was sign. I stared at the letter for a long time before calling Rivera. He picked up on the second ring. "They're trying to buy me out." There was a pause on the other end. "That means they're scared," he said quietly. And if they were scared, then I needed to know why. I wasn't going to let them bury the truth with that bunker. The letter sat on my kitchen table, practically daring me to take the money and walk away. But I couldn't. I had too many questions. And no amount of money was going to make them disappear. I called Rivera again that morning. He sounded tense. "They don't throw cash around unless they're desperate. Whatever's under that land? They can't afford for it to come out." I ran a hand over my face. "Then we need to figure out what it was." I spent the next several hours combing through every local and federal record I could get my hands on. Most of the documents said what I already knew: residential zoning. Nothing out of the ordinary. But buried in the older records, I found something else. A handful of archived files described my property as part of a decommissioned federal holding. The name? Western Defense Infrastructure Project. It sounded like any other bureaucratic nonsense, but my gut said otherwise. I took screenshots of everything. Saved backups, just in case someone decided those records shouldn't exist anymore. That afternoon, I stepped outside for some air. And that's when I saw it. A white SUV. It was parked just far enough down the street to pretend it was a coincidence, but close enough that I knew better. Someone was watching. I didn't realize it at first, but from that moment on, every move I made felt like it was being watched, closely. Later that evening, another letter showed up at my door. But this time, it wasn't an offer. It was a warning. A notice of zoning violations. Apparently, my property had suddenly fallen out of compliance with updated environmental codes, and unless I made immediate corrections, I'd start facing serious fines. The worst part? The so-called changes they wanted couldn't even be made, because I was no longer allowed on my own land. It was a setup. They were pushing me toward one of two outcomes: leave on my own, or drown in legal debt trying to stay. I drove straight to Rivera's place. He opened the door looking like he already knew. "I talked to a friend who used to work in zoning," he said. "They're hitting you with procedural violations they don't even have jurisdiction over. This is pressure, plain and simple." I leaned against his counter, jaw tight. "So what do we do?" Rivera crossed his arms. "We find out what they're hiding. But we need evidence." That night, we drove back to my property. We stayed hidden, watching from the shadows, waiting for anything out of the ordinary. Around 2 a.m., another unmarked truck pulled up near the restricted area. Two men got out, dragging heavy containers toward the sealed site. I zoomed in with my phone. They weren't just moving debris. They were hauling something out, something sealed. Rivera exhaled beside me. "That's not cleanup. That's extraction." I nodded, adrenaline kicking in. That meant whatever they buried wasn't just dangerous, it was valuable. The next day, I confronted the city officials handling my case. I demanded answers. Why the sudden violations? Why the forced buyout? Why federal personnel on my land? They gave me nothing but canned responses: environmental safety, classified concerns, and public security. All vague. All meaningless. But when I pressed harder, their tone shifted. "Mr. Bishop," one of them said calmly, "refusing this offer isn't in your best interest. We're giving you a way out. Before this becomes a larger issue." I studied the man across from me. He was too smooth, too prepared. I'd seen the type before. This wasn't a paper pusher, this was someone trained to shut people down. I took a step closer. "And what happens if I don't take your generous offer?" He smiled. But it wasn't friendly. "Then we begin treating this as a legitimate security risk. And believe me, legal trouble will be the least of your concerns." The message was clear. I left without another word, but now I knew for sure, whatever was buried under my property, they were desperate to keep it hidden. Desperate enough to break the rules to do it. The next few days were pure chaos. Every time I tried to push back, they pushed harder. New fines appeared in my mailbox, each one more ridiculous than the last. Structural issues. Safety hazards. Mandatory remediation. The kicker? I wasn't even allowed to step foot on the land to fix anything. Even the HOA jumped in. Out of nowhere, they started issuing violation notices for everything: overgrown hedges, unauthorized yard decorations, even complaints about noise. It was a full-blown coordinated attack. And I knew exactly why. Rivera called late one evening. His voice was tight. "They've been busy." He had spent the last 2 days chasing down leads, calling in favors, digging deep. And finally, He found something. My zoning contact found an old survey, he told me. Your property wasn't just part of a defense infrastructure plan. It was marked as a deep storage site. My brow furrowed. Deep storage for what? Rivera hesitated. That's the thing. Everything after that is blacked out. The words hit me like a lead weight. Something had been buried beneath my house long before I ever lived there. And now that I'd uncovered it, they were scrambling to keep the lid on it. I exhaled slowly. They're still moving things out. We saw those containers. That means this isn't over. Rivera nodded. And that means we need proof. So we made a plan. We couldn't just walk back onto the site, it was locked down like a military base. But we didn't need to break in. We just needed to see what they were doing. Rivera had a contact who loaned him a thermal drone. We set up late one night, parking several blocks away and launching from a wooded area near the back of the property. As the drone climbed, its infrared feed lit up on Rivera's laptop, grainy images of the land I used to call mine. At first, it looked empty. Just flat concrete and a ring of warning signs. But then we spotted it. A patch near the far end of the site, where the heat signatures didn't match the rest. Rivera zoomed in on the drone feed, enhancing the grainy image. That's an access point, he muttered. We watched in silence as two large trucks pulled up to the site. Their cargo areas were filled with bulky, sealed containers. A team of men, dressed in black tactical gear, stepped out and began unloading the crates, moving them toward a barely visible hatch built into the ground. It was almost completely disguised. But it was there, a hidden entrance. Rivera gave a low whistle. They're still pulling stuff out. That means the site isn't shut down. My stomach twisted. They hadn't just buried it, they were actively coming back. Whatever was hidden under my land wasn't just dangerous. It was either too volatile or too valuable to leave behind. And once they finished removing everything, what would they do with me? That night, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for them to silently force me off my property. If they wanted me gone, they'd have to do it publicly. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, someone who knew how to make noise. Someone media savvy. I laid everything out for him, every threat, every letter, every suspicious action. He leaned back in his chair, calm but firm. If you go public with this, they'll hit back. Hard. You sure you're ready for that? I nodded. I don't think I have a choice anymore. That same day, I contacted a local journalist, just gave her the essentials at first. Government overreach. Secret operations. Environmental hazards. She didn't hesitate. We agreed to meet in person that evening. I thought I was getting ahead of them. But I underestimated how far they'd go. That night, my power went out. At first, I thought it was just a blown transformer. But I stepped outside and quickly realized, the rest of the street was still lit. Only my house was dark. Then I saw it, the same black SUV from before, parked down the street. They weren't trying to hide anymore. They wanted me to know they were there. I locked my doors, grabbed a flashlight, and sat in the living room in silence. At 2 a.m., I heard a noise on the porch, a soft thud. I moved slowly toward the window. The SUV was gone. The street was empty. I opened the door. On the welcome mat was an envelope, plain, no name, no return address. I brought it inside and opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed in bold black letters, "Stop digging. Last warning." My heart pounded. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was a threat. And I knew exactly what it meant. If I didn't back down now, they weren't going to wait. They were going to make me disappear. The warning sat on the table like a live grenade. That simple message was a line in the sand. Either I walked away, or I'd find out just how far they were willing to go. But I wasn't backing down. An hour later, Rivera arrived. He read the note silently, then exhaled. This is different. I nodded, gripping the edge of the table. They're escalating. He met my eyes. Then so do we. We didn't waste time. The drone footage had confirmed something was still happening beneath the surface. But we needed more. Proof. Leverage. Rivera started calling around, reaching out to old contacts, anyone who might know what was really going on. Meanwhile, I prepared to go fully public. The journalist I had spoken with, Melissa Carter, was more interested than ever. When I told her about the envelope, she was practically begging to break the story. We agreed to meet that night at a small local cafe. But as I pulled into the lot, I noticed something instantly. I wasn't alone. A black sedan was parked at the far end, windows tinted just enough to obscure whoever was inside. I parked 2 spaces away, acting like I hadn't noticed. If they wanted to scare me, they were going to have to do better than that. Inside, Melissa was already seated. She was sharp, focused, and clearly sensed that this was more than just another strange story. I gave her everything: the buyout, the zoning violations, the containers, the hidden hatch. When I handed her the drone footage, she leaned in, eyes wide. This isn't just a cover-up. This is massive. I nodded. They know it too. She looked me dead in the eye. If I publish this, there's going to be fallout, for both of us. Are you ready? I exhaled slowly. I don't think I've got a choice anymore. We shook hands and parted ways. When I walked back out into the lot, the black sedan was gone. And honestly, that scared me more than if it had still been there. When I got home, Rivera was already waiting. Rivera stepped through the door, a file in hand. He dropped it on the counter, pages thick with redacted lines and stamped with declassified headers. I got this from a guy who owed me, he said. Took some digging. But we've got a name now: Project Sentinel. My pulse kicked up. That was the name we had seen inside the bunker. I flipped through the pages. Most of it was blacked out, but a few phrases stood out: classified military research, restricted access, containment protocols. I frowned. Containment? Rivera nodded. My guy said this wasn't just some old Cold War bunker. Whatever they had down there, it wasn't normal infrastructure. It was dangerous. Maybe unstable. My stomach turned. That's why they were still pulling things out. This wasn't just about hiding something, it was a cleanup. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Melissa. I answered, expecting her usual confident tone, but instead, all I heard was fear. Mark, you need to get out. Now. My chest tightened. What happened? She took a shaky breath. Someone called me. They knew about our meeting. They told me if I publish anything, I'll regret it. A cold realization hit me. They weren't just watching me. They were watching everyone I spoke to. I hung up and turned to Rivera. They know what we're doing. He clenched his jaw. Then we finish this. Tonight. We grabbed everything: documents, drone footage, printed records, and packed it onto a secure drive. If they were going to come for us, we weren't going to make it easy. Rivera had a contact. Someone inside the federal system who might be able to take what we had and apply real pressure. But getting it into the right hands, that was the hard part. As we stepped outside, we heard it, a low rumble. 2 black SUVs were crawling up the street. Rivera grabbed my arm. We need to go. Now. We sprinted to my truck, tossed the bag in the back, and tore out of the driveway. Tires screeched behind us as the SUVs picked up speed. Rivera dialed his contact. We've got it. We just need a handoff. The chase didn't last long. By the time we hit the highway, the SUVs had vanished. Like ghosts. But we both knew what it meant. That was their final warning. Either we backed off, or next time, we wouldn't drive away at all. Rivera's contact, Grant, agreed to meet us at an abandoned gas station on the edge of town. Former federal analyst. If anyone could blow this wide open, it was him. Grant stepped out from the shadows, expression unreadable. Rivera handed over the files. Grant flipped through them, his face darkening. "This is bad," he muttered. "If this goes public, it's going to expose something they buried for decades." Rivera nodded. "Project Sentinel." Grant's jaw tightened. That name should have stayed buried. I exhaled. "Then we make sure it doesn't disappear again." Grant studied me for a moment, then shook his head. "Proof isn't enough. You'll need someone powerful to stand behind it." Rivera thought for a moment. "I know a guy. Former intelligence. He can get this to the right people." Grant gave a nod. "Then move fast." That's when the rumble returned. Headlights flooded the lot. 2 more SUVs rolled in, slow and deliberate. Rivera shoved the files into Grant's hands. "Go. Now." Grant hesitated, then vanished into the night. The SUV doors opened. Men stepped out, calm, precise. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. "Mr. Bishop," he said, flatly. "You've been uncooperative." I squared my shoulders. "You've been persistent." The man didn't react. "Walk away. This can all disappear." Rivera's voice was calm but firm. "And if we don't?" The man's smile was razor thin. "Then you disappear." Silence. I took a slow breath. "That's not happening." The man's eyes narrowed. Rivera saw it before I did. "Run." A gunshot rang out. We dove behind the truck as more shots pinged off the metal around us. Then a roar of an engine. Grant's car skidded into view. "Get in." We bolted. Rivera jumped in first. I slid across the seat as Grant hit the gas. The SUVs tried to follow, but we had the lead. "They're not backing down," I muttered. "They never do," Rivera replied, loading his sidearm. We weaved through the streets, every turn a gamble. But they stayed back, keeping pace, waiting. Waiting for the moment to end it. Grant took a sharp turn, cutting through an alley and bouncing onto a side street. An overpass loomed ahead, the last barrier before the open highway. If we made it there, we had a shot. One of the SUVs surged forward, trying to cut us off. Grant gunned the engine. "Hold on." We shot past, scraping the railing as we slammed onto the highway. Behind us, one SUV crashed into the divider. The other stalled. We were gone. 3 days later, the headlines hit. A senator's office received an anonymous package, classified documents, drone footage, evidence of a buried facility. A major news outlet published the first exposé. The fallout was immediate. The buyout offer vanished. The HOA backed off. The violations disappeared. They couldn't silence what the public now knew. Then came one final letter. No threats. No warnings. Just a formal settlement. On my terms. I stared at the number. It was more money than I'd ever imagined. Rivera raised an eyebrow. "So, you taking it?" I looked back at the land that had almost cost me everything. "Yeah. I think I will." He smirked. "Never thought I'd see the day you outplayed them." Neither did they. As we drove away, I noticed something on the seat. An unmarked envelope. No name. Inside was a single note. "You made the right choice. But don't think for a second you knew everything." I folded it slowly. Some questions didn't need answers. Some secrets were meant to stay buried. The road stretched out in front of us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. That night in the motel, I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the tension to fade. There were no threats. No cars watching from the corner. No more knocking in the dark. But still, Something didn't sit right. The next morning, Rivera showed up with the newspaper. On the front page, chaos. Politicians denying involvement. Former officials scrambling to hide their tracks. But buried in the back, a smaller article caught my eye. Another land dispute. Another small town. Another classified intervention. Rivera handed me the paper. Looks familiar, doesn't it? I exhaled. This wasn't the only one. He nodded. Which means someone else is about to go through what you did. My jaw clenched. Not if I can help it. I left that day with a clean slate and a pocket full of hush money. But as I drove away, one thought stayed with me: this wasn't over. Somewhere, someone else was watching their home disappear. And they didn't even know why.